in the winter of 1943, long before fast food chains lined every highway and grocery stores overflowed with frozen dinners. Families across America survived on meals built from scraps, patience, and creativity. In mining towns, tucked into the hills of Pennsylvania, factory neighborhoods in Ohio, and farming communities across the South, supper often came from a single pot sitting quietly on the stove all day long. Those meals were not glamorous. They were born from rationing, empty wallets, and the determination to make sure nobody at the table went hungry. One of the simplest meals of the era was a humble cabbage and sausage stew. A few sliced hot dogs or smoked sausages were enough to flavor an entire pot filled with potatoes, onions, and cabbage. The broth absorbed the smoky flavor of the meat, while the vegetables softened into something warm and comforting. Families could feed 6 people for the price of a few coins, and leftovers stretched into the next day. In steel towns and mining camps, that smell drifting through the kitchen meant another hard day had been survived. Another classic supper was macaroni beef stew, known in many homes simply as goulash. A small amount of ground beef was browned with onions until the edges came. Then tomatoes, water, spices, and elbow macaroni were tossed into the same pot. As it simmered, the pasta absorbed every bit of flavor, turning a tiny amount of meat into a meal large enough for an entire family. Mothers mastered the art of stretching ingredients because they had no choice. Every penny mattered. In colder northern states, salt pork and potato stew became a winter staple. Salt-cured pork simmered for hours with potatoes and onions until the broth thickened into a rich, creamy soup. The pork fat melted into the liquid, creating a meal heavy enough to sustain laborers through long days in mines, mills, and factories. Homemade bread was often dipped into the broth until every drop disappeared. During wartime rationing, canned meats became lifesavers. Spam and bean stew appeared in kitchens everywhere. Cubes of canned meat were browned in cast-iron pots before being simmered with beans, onions, and carrots. The result was smoky, hearty, and filling. Families who disliked canned meat on its own discovered that slow cooking transformed it into something entirely different. And when money was nearly gone before payday, onion stew became the emergency meal. A few sliced onions, cooked slowly in leftover bacon grease, could create a surprisingly rich flavor. Flour and milk turned it into a creamy soup that filled stomachs when cupboards were almost empty. It was proof that resourcefulness could turn the simplest ingredients into comfort. These meals disappeared, not because they failed, but because prosperity convinced people they no longer needed them. Convenience foods replaced slow cooking, and recipes once passed through generations slowly vanished from memory. Yet today, as grocery prices rise again, many of those forgotten meals suddenly seem wiser than ever. But the most surprising part is this. The deeper you go into these old recipes, the stranger and more inventive they become. Because the next group of forgotten stews included ingredients most modern families would never imagine putting on the dinner table, and yet they kept entire communities alive. What happened next in America's kitchens may completely change the way you look at poor people food forever.